just kicking over the rocks in our community and discovering what ministries are out there and what ministries are important to be in partnership with. And one of those ministries that we know that is of tremendous value here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, is a ministry called Haven House. And joining with us today is the board president of Haven House, Andrea Rogers. Andrea, thank you so much for joining with us. I appreciate you taking some time with us today. And
thank you.
And we're just going to go through a series of questions. Now, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube or on Facebook, if you have any specific questions for Andrea, I'll take a quick look at the chat. You'll need to go to Vimeo to be able to interact. So if you go into Vimeo, you're going to see this live. And if you have any chat requests or any questions that you might have for Andrea, we'll take a look at the end of this. But in the meantime, I've got some questions for you along the way.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jay.
All right. So obviously, something is driving you when it comes to Haven House. For those of you who are not from Haven House is a domestic violence
shelter and advocacy. It's the only shelter and advocacy organization in Sandoval County, which is a huge county. It goes all the way from Cuba to Rio Rancho to Placitas, Corrales. So it's really, really important.
Yeah. Wow. That covers a lot of territory. Now, obviously, you have to be passionate to be able to be willing to go into the trenches and then, deal with such a severe issue as domestic violence. I assume it might be personal to some degree for you. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey along the way? I know you just shared about Haven House, but tell me about your journey along the way as well.
Well, first, I'm not actually really in the trenches. I don't work directly with victims or survivors, but I am on the board, and so we help support the organization. I had some family members that had been touched by domestic violence, and interestingly, I didn't know the signs, and so I wasn't aware. Something that's kept quiet, it's not discussed, people might be embarrassed, and they don't want others to know about their personal lives or their situations.
Sure.
So that's kind of how I got involved. I heard about it through the Chamber of Commerce.
Wow.
And learned about the different ways that I could become involved.
Sure.
Official definition is, and the main word to think of is pattern. It's a pattern of intimidation, abuse. It doesn't always have to be physical abuse or sexual abuse. It can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be economic. So whenever there's a control from one person over another in an unhealthy manner, that is violence, considered violence from an intimate partner. So it could be a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend,
sure,
that type of thing.
Okay. What does domestic violence look like in New Mexico? How does that play out here locally for us?
So unfortunately, New Mexico has higher incidences of domestic violence, 1 in 3 women, and I think it's 1 in 10 men. Control by an intimate partner.
Different for genders? Is there any variance in gender?
Well, so 1 in 10 around. Some statistics say in New Mexico, typically, and then that that could also be same-sex relationship. Only 1 in 3 victims are women.
Okay. Are there additional statistics that you were just talking about? Are there additional statistics that maybe our community might not be aware of? That's enough by itself, 1 in 3.
Yeah. Well, the majority of domestic violence crimes that happen, so physical abuse or so many different types of crimes that are related to domestic violence are never actually reported. I think the statistics are about 60%.
Wow.
So it still is a silent crime.
Okay. At its core, what really about? And you know, on the surface, you
Sure.
might have one perception of what domestic violence is, but what is it really about?
You know, we talk about control, but really at its root, it is the inability of someone to handle anger. You know, they want to place blame on someone else for the offender. And then for a victim, oftentimes women and some men grow up and it's a society, you know, they see patterns of abuse and control modeled. They've not been a part of healthy relationships. And so it's just a perpetuation of, you know, an inability to recognize as a teenager an unhealthy relationship. So they get into an unhealthy relationship. For the offenders, they unfortunately are often punished for their crimes, but they're not taught how to handle anger or how to understand that they don't have the right to control someone else.
Right, right. I think many might come to a real quick assumption that, you know, if you're in one of those situations, you just would naturally just kind of want to run away and, you know, problem solved. But are there triggers that cause a victim to return back to its abuser?
You know, and that's a really important question because you hear that a lot. How could that person stay with someone who hurt them, or how could they stay if their kids are maybe at risk? And so much of it, again, is what you've learned. You've learned unhealthy relationships. You've learned to kind of retreat. But it often is economic. People don't have a way to get out of it. They're isolated. Isolation is kind of one of the first things that an offender will do, is isolate you from your friends, your family, from your job, and then are then afraid to kind of reach out and ask for help.
Wow. You mentioned earlier that this issue is very quiet. Why do you feel that it is so hidden? Is it because of embarrassment, or what are those factors?
I mean, from victims directly, it's shame, it's embarrassment, but it's also a lack of means of getting out of it. It often is an economic, takes an economic toll. When someone works, the money is taken away, or there is a lack of money. And so it makes it very difficult. And then it really is shame. People
Sure.
are afraid to say or ashamed to say that they either got themselves into a situation where it really is, they're in over their heads, or that they've repeated that, because we see that a lot is many folks who reach out to shelters, unfortunately, have a history of just returning and, you know, perpetuating the unhealthy bonds with people who
Yeah.
are abusive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of that, you don't know if it is a friend or a neighbor or a coworker. Because it is hidden, it's very hard to identify.
Right.
But then there are those times where you might suspect, someone might be involved in a situation like this, and that can lead to some very uncomfortable situations. But someone might, what do I do if I think somebody is a victim?
That's a really good question. And really ask. If whoever it is, don't be afraid to ask. You might offend, but and if you're afraid to ask at first, observe. If you notice that somebody has suddenly, a friend of yours or a coworker, is suddenly isolating themselves, do they have a new phone number because of a new relationship? Are they no longer doing things with you that they used to do? If it's family, sometimes you can tell that as well. Coworkers, are they suddenly missing work? Abuse often happens too when someone loses their job, or they become involved in drugs or alcohol, or they
Sure. Along those lines, public awareness.
A leadership role in addressing a really tough issue. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and so unfortunately this year we can't hold our annual picnic and barbecue. But organizations can raise awareness. For our organization, we post notices in the restrooms, men's and women. We send out emails about domestic violence. We ask managers to take a domestic violence training
course.
and just identify the things that can help. We notify all our employees and say, if you are a victim of domestic violence, there are specific state laws that allow for time off. But it's raising awareness. It's saying, don't be afraid to tell a manager or don't be afraid to tell HR. There are billions of dollars lost because of, lost time and at work and for absenteeism.
Mm-hmm.
Really look learn help to
Active ministry. But every now and then you get that scenario, you get that moment that causes you to take that step back and just reflect and say, because of this moment, all of that effort and all of that energy, it was just so worth it. Is there a story in your journey along the way, obviously without naming names, but is there a story in a similar manner that has impacted you in that way?
there's so many. I think one of the issues with domestic violence is, when you see so many statistics and you hear some of the stories, you feel overwhelmed and you
Sure.
think nothing is helping. But for me, for our work, when we really kind of started addressing the issue and letting people know about the policies and just sending out an email saying, if you are a victim of domestic violence, contact me. Somebody did. And I got with the manager and I said, has this person missed work? And found out that over the last, year, the person their work responsibilities declined because there was a lot of absenteeism. And I think part of it was when the person got injured, they didn't want to come to work because somebody would notice. And
Sure.
so we were able to reach out to that person and say, here are the resources. Because once somebody identifies that they're a victim of domestic violence, suddenly employment laws apply. And so we were able to say, okay, now this person is, and we were able to put her in touch with a local. It wasn't somebody in New Mexico, but we were able to put her in touch with a local advocacy group, because some people don't need to actually go into shelter, but they need help with maybe orders of protection or child. So when you can, put someone in touch with those resources, she suddenly is thriving, and she is an amazing, she's gone into management and has had such amazing success that just by letting someone know that, you have
Resources are
yeah,
there.
you have resources, you have help, you have the support of your employer, and that, somebody could go on, and that her son's life is now positively affected because he's out of a situation where, this was a boyfriend situation and he's no longer a part of that.
Sure.
And then also getting her the resources to look at what is a healthy relationship and how does that affect my job and what should I look for in the future.
Sure. There might be someone in the community now that's watching this who gets a hold of that passion as well.
Definitely.
The same way with you. Yeah, I would imagine there'd probably be some type of a vetting process if there even is, but
Sure.
are there opportunities to jump in and come alongside with Haven House to help support?
Definitely. We need board members, number one. But also, Jay, there's so many different ways that people can help. At Church Alive, our Community Impact Fund, if that's the technical term, has supported Haven House. And so whenever you donate over your tithes to the Community Impact Fund, it just helps because the majority of domestic violence shelters are funded through organizations like CYFD, VOCA, which is the those funds are the ability to bill out a certain amount of money, and yet if there's a roof leak, you don't have the money to use it for that.
Sure.
Additional, because we can't, shelters typically can't hold enough sizes, variety of sizes of clothing and, personal items. So when women go out and if you donate clothing, say to a Goodwill or a local organization, we can give vouchers to women and men to get clothing for, say, upcoming job interviews. There is, if you'd love to come into shelter and actually work with a victim, or even outside of shelter, typically there's varying degrees of classes that you can take. They're often offered through, locally through the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They have fabulous online classes as well, I think, right now. But you can all of those things can be done, through the local church and then by contacting a local shelter.
Okay. Wow. For those of you out there, and especially for the Church Alive family, yes, this is part of the initiative that we have been doing here at Church Alive.
Thank you for your financial support.
Absolutely. So Haven House is one of many ministries that we've come along and supported because of your dollars to Haven House, which is roughly equivalent of $100 a month to come alongside. Haven House is one of many ministries that we have come alongside to support. So from the bottom of our heart, yes, thank you. Absolutely.
We truly appreciate it because those funds can be used in any way needed.
Sure.
So it's the earmarked funds are huge.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So I did check chat, and looks like we're good right now.
Great.
For those of you who are watching this live on Facebook Live, you might be watching this later on where we're not live, but if you catch a hold of this and you have a question, certainly throw it in the comments area. We'll look to do our due diligence to follow through.
Yeah.
Same with those of you who are out there on YouTube. You can do the same thing. We'll take a look at the comments and make sure that we follow through with questions that you might have as well there. And in addition, once again, thank you guys for your generosity with the Community Impact Fund. I know that's right around the corner.
Yes.
I will be sharing the depth of the scale of how much has been allocated to where, so that those who were faithful in coming alongside and have an awareness of all the great things. Andrea, I just wanted to say thank you for joining with us and just giving us a little bit of enlightenment on this. You know, it is such a quiet thing that oftentimes it can, you know, fly under the radar a little bit, and it's important to bring these conversations to light. Question: how can we be in prayer for you, and then also how can we be in prayer for Haven
Sure.
House?
So yeah, like I said, we're looking for board members, specifically, you know, anyone who has financial experience, marketing experience, and really from all sectors: retired, working folks, students. We would love to have a couple more victims, people who are, and I shouldn't say communities become aware that churches, you know, can partner, and that we can really reduce, you know, the numbers of people who are affected by domestic violence.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, once again, Andrea, thank you so much for joining
Thank you,
with
Jay,
us.
and thank you again to everyone who has supported, well, all the efforts. We
Absolutely.
really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Excuse me. That was a little weird. So, community, hope you have a great day. Thank you for joining with us. And
Thank you again.
If you have any comments out there, we'll do our due diligence to follow through. But until then, God bless and have a